Ba-dum-dum, da-dee-da-da-da-dum. Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. Well, hello, whoever, wherever, whenever you are. I'm just having one of those days. I did actually get a lot done today in my sewing pursuits. Um, but I was perusing the internet, particularly wandering aimlessly through the great and glorious land of Utopia. And I ran across something that's going on with a channel I used to watch. It's called Hidden True Crime, and it was a channel. I guess it's still out there. I don't watch it anymore. But it's a Mormon couple, Lauren and I think her husband's name is John Mathias. And they were doing a lot of interesting coverage of the Daybell cult, which is why I was watching them. I was watching a lot of channels that were covering that story. That's the one where those fringe Mormons up in East Idaho basically decided they could point people and their families out as zombies, label them zombie and kill them for spiritual reasons, but not before they had taken out very large life insurance policies on the zombies. Think about that. Interesting financial plan they had. Anyway, they ended up in prison. And I had no other reason to keep watching that channel. There were a couple of red flags about the characters of Lauren and John Mathias, but nothing beyond, people are not perfect. Lauren Mathias is a very nice looking, attractive young woman, not too young, she and her husband, I guess they're in their 40s. And her channel became extremely successful, so they're making a lot of money. And apparently, from what I see now, she spends a lot of that money on Botox. I mean, she's got the absolutely typical Botox cheeks. They're not natural. I mean, when there's a close-up, you can tell on these women, they all have, it's like their doctors are all following the same blueprint for what a face should look like, because the cheek part here, I mean, you can see I haven't had any Botox, but the cheek part here gets like an extra bump in it that's not normal. And so you can tell. Plus the smoothness of the forehead and all that. And they have things done to their eyes that make them all look exactly alike. I mean, it makes me think of that old movie, The Stepford Wives, back in the 60s, that had people wondering if, it was a story of men trading their wives in for robots designed to look exactly like the original wife, except that they all ended up looking alike. Anyway, I was noticing this. And I was noticing that some of the red flags about the Mathias is that they appeared very professional in their coverage of the Daybell case. They were just, looking at the court proceedings and the arrests and talking about the psychology of the behavior in the courtroom. So it was no big deal. And when I was no longer interested in following that story, I stopped following that channel. But now there's a whole big thing going on, drama around Lauren Mathias, who is really surprising me because she's apparently been acting exactly like these YouTube self-centered trolls who believe the whole world revolves around them. She's been doing restraint orders and court cases and making all kinds of ridiculous claims against other people who are just YouTube call them YouTube journalists or whatever, that cover the same topics as she covers. In other words, she's acting just like Terry Joyce. Now, Terry Joyce, you can tell by looking at her that her looks are natural, including her hair that I said looked like a wig. It did at one time. I mean, she's got a better hairdresser lately, but at one time she did look like she was wearing a cheap wig. And everybody jokes about it, and she can't take a joke. It's very difficult to live your life as a stand-up comedian when you can't take a joke. But again, that's her. Lauren Mathias seemed like a much more intelligent and serious person. In the first place, she was never presenting herself as someone who makes a living telling dirty jokes. And then I was surprised when, for some reason or other, the feed started showing me the stuff going on around her and her husband. He's turning out to have exaggerated his psychological resume. Not surprising, people do that. And I did have the little bit of a red flag about them as a couple, that he seemed a beta male, put it that way. He just seemed a little bit not quite there, but it doesn't really mean anything. And this thing of Lauren Mathias suddenly looking like she's had an awful lot of Botox treatment, and her personality is different from what it was. Because when I was watching her channel during the period of time it was growing, because everybody was interested in the Daybell cult story, and the channels that did a lot of coverage grew a lot at the time, became very competitive. She wasn't acting the way she acts now. And I started to think about, there's a lot of these people that are professional influencers, and you can tell the ones that are spending their money on Botox. As I say, they all are, the doctors are all using the same blueprint for what they want their faces to look like. It's really scary. It's like looking at people turn themselves into aliens or something. And I began to wonder, does Botox cause the mind to become much more childlike and egocentric than the person was before they got the treatments? Because, as I say, her behavior is not the same as it was. And this thing of, believing the police are supposed to get involved because somebody is talking about the same topics you're interested in, and you don't like their take on it, you don't like their approach or their opinion, and then thinking that's a police matter. That sort of thing, it's actually very childlike. It shows that the person does not have the capacity to understand the difference between something like an actual credible threat to your safety or somebody who's simply, a professional competitor on the same topic. There are other people who are covering the Daybell trials, showing up at the courthouse and stuff. And Lauren Mathias took out restraint orders against at least one of them to prevent her from being able to go to, no, it wasn't the courthouse. It was a true crime convention of these YouTube true crime journalists. And it's a pretty big deal if you're doing that as a professional career. You don't want to block somebody out. A normal person would know that you're going to damage yourself a lot by being known as somebody who's going to stop other journalists from being able to even attend a professional conference. But a child doesn't think that way. A child is like, oh, don't like her. It's my ball game. I'm going to take the ball and go home. Or I'm going to make her get off the field because it's my ball game. You know, it's my basketball. And what is this? Wait a minute. I got something going on here in my chat that I don't. Okay. All messages. Well, YouTube just offered me something that I don't like. YouTube. They're not managing their thing very well. But anyway, I got 5 people here, and YouTube is putting an ad in trying to get me to answer stupid survey questions in my own chat. Seriously, YouTube? Distraction. Sorry about that. So I'm really wondering, I think Botox must be actually affecting these people. You'd have to really look at a lot of these Hollywood people who've had a lot of these treatments, but have been in the public eye for a long time. So from before they get the treatments to after they've lived with that stuff because it's in their skin, it's in there. They got Botox in their forehead and in their cheeks, and they do the poofy lips thing. And there would have to be a study, and I think there should be a study to see if, in fact, Botox is causing some kind of mental disorder that involves becoming so completely immersed in your own selfish world that you can't really judge what you're doing in your profession or in your interactions. Because that looks to me like what's going on with Lauren Mathias. I mean, they're a Mormon couple, okay? So when you belong to a religion that insists that you believe the stuff that's in the Book of Mormon, you're kind of off to a bad start. But even so, most Mormons are fairly normal people. And the ones that I've interacted with in different ways, they've had normal interactions with other people. But like many evangelical cultures, because they're aggressively evangelical, and aggressively proselytizing groups, no matter what their background, whether they're Christian or some other thing, they're always looking at themselves relating to the other person. They're much more interested in how you are receiving them than in simply living their own lives. Because their mission is to sell their culture to somebody else. People who grow up in non-evangelical, non-proselytizing cultures, our mission is simply to live our lives. Some of us might be interested in really thinking about the religious side of it, the theological, ethical, cultural stuff. We might study that, but we're much more comfortable with just taking people as they are and not worrying about whether they like us or don't like us. But any kind of proselytizing culture does automatically focus heavily on, do I look beautiful? Am I making the best presentation to this other person? Because that's what counts for them. So there was a lot of that in the Mathias couple to begin with. You could see that. And that's why I just shrugged it off. I didn't think it meant anything. I certainly didn't expect Lauren Mathias to turn into a junior high school mean girl. And I'm wondering if the fact that she now acts like a junior high school mean girl, if it's actually not Lauren's fault, but if it's the fault of Botox. I think people need to start asking that question. Anyway, that's what's keeping me up tonight, I guess. So I guess if I got that to worry about, I guess I don't have too many worries in life, right? Let me go see if anyone is talking in chat. Oh, darn. Okay. I don't know what's going on here. Well, it looks like I'm still live, but my screen is looking funny. And it's not. It's not letting me see my own chat. I hope you're all behaving in there. I'm going to end the stream. See y'all later. Bye-bye.